Tony's on his way, but we're going to get started.
I apologize.
One of those days, huh?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, call this meeting to order.
Good.
We have public comment first. I do have a card. Mrs. Wilson,
Yes. So these work? I think these
3 minutes.
Hi.
Hi.
Does this work? I don't know
Thank
if
you
it
for
works.
waiting.
It's working. You're welcome. Yeah, I have a comment about academic achievement and school coverage, particularly with substitute teachers. Teachers go out for training, and as an example today, I was out at a training at Grand Valley, and it's been on the agenda for a month. And a month ago, I put in my absence so I could get substitute coverage, and in fact, it was picked up within 12 hours. And sometime between last night and this morning, that substitute dropped my job. So there was no substitute coverage in my room. And it's not a once-off. We've had a whole week at our school where we've had 5 and 6 rooms with no substitute coverage. And I've got teachers who are coming in and they're upset because there has been nobody in their room other than kids. And, I understand, if you're in college or university, they're adults. You can leave them in the room, even if it is for the entire time because you have a PhD. But we're talking about 15-year-olds. We're talking about 30, 15-year-olds in a room by themselves with no adult coverage. And teachers are concerned for the safety of their kids, and certainly for the learning environment that their kids are in. And I understand this is not just our school, it's district-wide. I know that we have a contract with PESG, and my understanding is the contract with PESG says that they will provide substitutes. It's not happening. And a lot of teachers are deeply concerned. I am deeply concerned because I have no control over it. I believe that what I do when I go out for training is very beneficial. Teachers are sick. I mean, there was a teacher who was out sick last week. We've got flu going around, even though we had flu shots. We need to do something. So I'm asking you, I don't know when the PESG contract comes up for renewal, to look at the PESG contract, but also to look at it right now, because they seem to be unable to provide substitutes for us and substitute coverage. And when we've got kids who are, we've got absentee problems, why would they come if there's nobody in the room? It's really pretty scary. Thanks.
Thank you.
okay. Have any others? So it's up to you.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Slade and Pastor Matisse. I would just like to have permission to move one of our agenda items to the end, or perhaps move to just use the notes that were uploaded on Friday. Cindy Peck is en route, but she is not here yet.
Everybody's in.
Okay. So if we could move priority schools to the end of our agenda.
Surely.
Okay.
And then also, I'd just like to take about 30 seconds to introduce some probably unfamiliar faces that have not come before you in the past, that are going to be presenting. You have Pat Reagan. Pat Reagan's going to cover instructional council. Mel Adkins. But we also have Kurt Johnson, who's going to discuss alternative ed. Lori Peterson is sitting next to Kurt. Val Tonks is sitting next to her. Dr. DeBoer, Maya Frazier, who is from our counseling department. All of these people, along with Ron Gorman, are here to just open up a discussion around alternative education. So I just want, and then one other person, Laura Lamore, I don't think you've met her. She's now heading up our special ed department.
Certainly have met her.
Great. So I just wanted to make sure that you could attach a face with the names of these individuals who have been working very hard to bring a recommendation or discussion to the board regarding alternative ed. Thank you.
I'll let you, why don't you just chat?
Sure. Oh, you need to rest? I just started it. I just started, so. weapon in my hand. This means you're gonna zip through this agenda.
I would like to apologize for my colleague, John Matthias, for his lateness. So.
He just got it just before you.
Yeah, very gracious here. We both had very pressing matters across town, so. Sorry.
just up there waiting till I had gone, and then
Oh, I missed the highlight of my month.
you did.
So, I apologize, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, good afternoon, Dr. Baker, Mrs. Slade, and Reverend Matthias. Cindy Peck has asked me to do the part that she usually takes care of for the instructional council and the minutes. She's en route from a monitoring session with MDE at one of her schools. So I'm just going to very quickly go over the instructional council update from the meeting on November 21st, 2014 at GRPS University. Mary Bowens, the new GREA president, was introduced to all present members, and the following topics were discussed. There was a math lab presentation. Amy Powney, the math curriculum specialist, updated the council on the further development and implementation of this course. This is an elective course that has been implemented at comprehensive middle schools for identified struggling math students. Mrs. Powney is providing ongoing professional learning for staff who are implementing this course and monitoring students' progress around the online components of the program. She's going to be returning to the council in the spring to provide additional updates to the syllabus. The curriculum guide, Josie Corniff from the Office of Information Services, that's the new title that I'm getting comfortable with, shared with the council the district curriculum guide for grades 9 through 12. The guide is on the district website and is used by high school counselors and students for selecting courses at each of the high schools. We have a few subcommittees. The equity subcommittee is currently at a revising point until they determine their next steps. The technology and curriculum drive chairpersons were absent, and our next meeting is December 18th, this week. Are there any?
So I do wonder, is Mary going to be an ongoing member? Is it typical?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, great. That's really good.
Any updates on the particular members, I think, will be coming forward at another meeting.
Okay, great.
Okay,
All
thank
right,
you.
Thanks a lot. Okay.
Got a PowerPoint, huh?
Of course Mel has a
Hey.
PowerPoint.
What a surprise.
Yeah, sure.
Today, well, good afternoon again. My name is Mel Atkins. Today I'm here to talk about our efforts to reduce chronic absenteeism. And so I've brought this various reports to this committee before. Just to give a little background, one of our goals this year is sometimes you get caught up in numbers and you're getting caught up in the percentages and numbers, but if you look at the child on the screen and say, make sure you have someone in mind when you do this work. And it's very important that you keep, whoever that may be, a child in mind, because each child that's not chronically absent makes a difference. So we have a long way to go still, but that face is just a reminder to say, it does make a difference. So just to give some history about chronic absenteeism, the definition of chronic absenteeism is missing 10% of the school year for any reason, excused or unexcused. We still look at truancy. Truancy talks about excused absences, so if you call in or if you get excused for a reason. But we know through our studies and also through the national research, it doesn't matter if you're not here, if you're not here. So it makes a big difference with that. So some of the reasons why students are absent could be, I'm going to focus on aversions today, is if a child is struggling academically, they may not, if you're struggling, you may not want to go to that particular class for the reasons. So some of the reasons could be, some of it could be behavior issues that come out of it, or skipping class, but the reason is why, because I need help. The poor school climate is another one. We're working on having safe and orderly schools that creates a learning environment. But we want that at all times. Is one. And the last one I want to talk about is sometimes parents have a negative school experience, and we know we need to partner with parents, but sometimes coming to schools may trigger something that's happened to them at a younger age, and so we have to keep that in mind too. This data here is, I want to start with the end of the year data. So this compares the last 3 years of 2011-12, 12-13, and 13-14. As you can see, at the high school level is where the numbers are going down, as the percent of students and the number of students. Just 2 years ago, 2011-12, we were at 36.7% chronically absent. And then last year, we ended at 35.1%. Now, it's not a true apples-to-apples comparison because we lost a number of students in the district. But if you think about it, we from 11-12 to 13-14, there was approximately 1,100 student reduction in chronic absenteeism. Some of that was contributed to declining enrollment, but some of it was contributed to our efforts with reducing chronic absenteeism. There was, last year, we did home visits too, combining with family support specialists and our own security department. We had 2,850 home visits. And so these are some of the proactive measures. You know, they add up. If you think about the number, 2,800 home visits is pretty staggering that we've done. One thing that this chart here shows is the number of students by race, and we know that we're concerned at the kindergarten level. The transitions in 9th grade stick out to me, and the orange is the African American students, and that's really is 47.4% of our African American students were chronically absent last year, so that's almost close, almost half, and so. And some of that plays into, we know we're working on reducing suspensions. Last year, 19.1 of all of our students were suspended one or more times. And so, you know, the efforts of restorative justice, the school climate, you know, that all has an impact on these numbers. So if you fast forward to current, what I just tried to do is show you a different way of looking at it. So we ended 2012 at 36.4. Last year was 35.1% chronically absent, and then as it is last week when I pulled the numbers, right now we're at 23.7% chronically absent. Our goal is to reduce by 10%. You know, that's an attainable goal, we think. Right now we're at a 32.4% reduction, but we know it's only half the year. So when you compare this year at this same time compared to last year at this same time, we have a 4.9% reduction in chronic absenteeism. So we're about halfway there. You know, there's a lot of work. We know the holidays are coming up. You know, we need to stay through Friday, get here on the first day of school starts, is for example.
So December 2013 would be, what, 27?
Yep, so it was pretty much 24 point, it was a 4.9% increase. Yep. With that. So some things that we do, we always tout these research-based strategies. And one thing I want to just hit on today, not all of them, is really we have kind of our second annual attendance challenge. The previous year was called Make Every Day Count. This year is called Challenge 5. And Challenge 5, it deals with kind of all these areas, but one is recognize good and improve attendance. If you've seen this acronym around, there's a lot of things that deal with Challenge 5. It stands for strive for less than 5 days absence for students. I mean, you know that's just kind of the catchy way of saying it. We want parents to attend 5 different events. You know, so those are the couple things that we do around the attendance challenge. And then schools this year could sign up for a toolkit. And we didn't pass out the toolkit if everyone didn't want it. Some people said, I can do things in my building, but if you wanted things like a leaderboard, everyone got a leaderboard, yard signs, stickers, ribbons, attendance charts, home charts, that was available at no cost to them. And then also, Maggie Malone, through our Fine Arts Department, she worked with those same schools, and they had like attendance posters that kids created about Challenge 5 and the importance of attendance. We also was exciting this year about Parent University. Parent University was our second year. I remember this is a community collaborative to help parents become full partners in education. What we did was Power Parents, but we also launched a new website. So on this website, it's parents.grps.org. So on parents.grps.org, brand new remaster, but here you can sign up for Parent University classes, learn about Challenge 5, become a Power Parent. Each school has their events, parent groups. If you want to search for a particular parent group, what you can do is pick any school. What you will get is the contact information, who it is, who to contact, but also the schedules are on the side. We have online courses now available through Parent University. And the first, when you register for Parent University, the first course it takes you to is the online course, is the importance of attendance. As I was
People
waiting.
registered for this,
What's that?
the register screen, how many people registered? Do you?
No, good question. So we've had 11,206 site visits so far. We launched it the first week in October, so it's been literally 2 months. In 2 months, we've had over 11,200 site visits, and then we've had over 1,700 course completions. So that means either online or traditional face-to-face. We've had, and it looks like over 400 parents have actually registered for these courses online. Nope, so good question. So let me take you real back to the PowerPoint. Then the last thing I want to touch upon is we're piloting something called Project Lift. And Project Lift really deals with, is at Ottawa, Alger, and Union. And we've had 1,100 parents sign up, and we're trying to, and it's really through the work of Dr. Peter Bergman out of Columbia University. And what we're trying to do here is figure out, does like high quality academic information increase parent engagement? So if they have access to grade books, and parents signed off, for example, if you alert a parent to missing grades or missing assignments or this test, what will they do with the information? No, so we have a control group, not a control group. We have, and so there's really 3 research-based questions we're trying to answer, and then see if we can scale it up if it works. We think there's good traction on it so far. It took a few months to launch it, but we really just launched it probably in the last 3-4 weeks. And the feedback we've been getting is parents are saying they're putting the pressure on their students, but also putting pressure on staff too, and saying grades have to be in. I'm getting this call. Students are knowing now someone's checking. You have an interaction between the two. What it could look like, we have partners that do this. We have Brown Hutchinson, Jubilee Jobs, Hispanic Center, Steepletown, United Methodist are all partners in this task with Believe to Become. And then typical week for community partners are this. 3 days a week, they text, call, or email. And the key with this is parents get to choose which method they want to be contacted by. Some people like text messages, some people don't. But you get your form of communication however you want it. And then, so we're really, you see 10 visits per week, 80 visits every 2 months. There was a training aspect behind it. It's really at 3 schools now, but we're saying we're trying to see if this is something before we go full blown, that's something we can continue to do. And then just key messages we always want to say when we talk about attendance. One is absences add up. is if you can miss the first day of the month and the last day of the month, but at the end of the year, that's 18 days missed. Absences do matter. Every day matters. Bell to bell matters. Teachers can tell you that it matters if you come 10 or 15 minutes later or leave 10 or 15 minutes early. Every second counts. It's important. But we also know the sixth one is relationships is important. We have to break the barrier between the old model between parents and schools. One doesn't have it all, but we can do it together with parents. So, questions? You have any around attendance or parent engagement?
It's like good work.
I have a couple questions. One is, parents can already get, aside from the robocall, they can get email messages from us.
Yep.
From the school has that capacity now, correct?
Yep. So the slight difference is now you get an email. Instead of a robocall, you can get an actual phone call from a person that says it can help talk through, and they may say, I don't know this resource, or where do I go here, or how do I navigate this? And so it's just layering on. But it is an option. It is an option. Parents, you're absolutely right. On our enrollment form, you can either fill out, or if you haven't, go to your local school and say, I want to receive that information. You can start getting it right away.
If the parent is providing the cell phone or the email message and it's entered into the system can, they can choose to say, I'm gonna do a robocall, I'm gonna do an email. They can sort that, correct? Now,
Absolutely.
every school.
Every school.
Because, that's important. I know you're piloting it with Union and Elder and stuff, but in reality,
Yep, and in reality is everyone can get it now, but the difference is you get that personal contact with this pilot, I would say.
Thank you. All right, thanks a lot.
Yep.
Actually, when Mel leaves, I'll sit over there. Yeah, leaves.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I get some technology here going here. Thank you all for allowing us to have this conversation regarding alternative education. Because we know not every student learns the same, or even at the same rate. Not every student responds to the traditional school environment. And not every student balances their life situations equally. Because we serve all students, we're challenged with the task of finding other means for them to achieve the same educational goals as any other student. And we're challenged to also find environments for them to also be able to attain the same educational goals as any other students. And when we think of alternative education, it's kind of derived from that root word alternate, which just simply means different. If you think about, if our final destination was Los Angeles, and we had individuals who chose to take a plane, some a train, some a car, some a bus. The ones who take a plane might end up in Los Angeles sooner. The ones in train might come in second. Those who drive might be third, and the bus might be last. But
And people be complaining too, so they had to take that bus.
And complaining on that bus. But ultimately, they land in the same place, Los Angeles. And so thinking about how we challenge ourselves by creating environments so that every student has that opportunity. The Michigan Department of Education allows districts to have a little bit of flexibility and freedom in terms of designing those atmospheres or environments for students to learn. And so that really drives a need for alternative education. Sometimes when we think of alternative education, sometimes people think it's less than. But with the Michigan Merit Curriculum that is standard for every student, regardless of the program, if they want to receive a high school diploma, there's not much room to wiggle around the standards that are set forth by the state. So when we hear the term alternate, it means different, but it does not mean less than. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Gorman, who's going to talk a little more about some of the purpose and the rationale around this conversation, as well as we kind of dig through some other things that we want to propose to the committee.
So thank you. Good afternoon. This has been on our minds for quite some time, both from the folks at the cabinet level, at the building level, specifically principals and teachers who work in alternative education. And just to give you a refresher on the alternative education programs we have in the school district, we have Grand Rapids Learning Center, which is housed on Grand Rapids Community College's campus. This is an exclusively online learning environment where we have an instructional waiver. Students attend school. We have 2 sections each day. Both are 4-hour sections, 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon. And the students who attend the Grand Rapids Learning Center, formerly known as Turning Point, have the opportunity to take dual enrolled classes at Grand Rapids Community College. So a huge No problem. A huge positive of the program is these are students who, for the most part, were disengaged in a traditional setting, got a little bit behind, and now they are now they've been given essentially a clean slate and a re-engaged GPA. And after 1 semester of coursework at Grand Rapids Learning Center, they can take those dual enrollment classes. Our traditional alternative education environment for many of our students is Southeast Career Pathways, which is located on Jefferson. Principal Chet Huff has about 77 students right now. We accept students there at the beginning of the school year and in the middle of the school year. The students who are entering alternative education in our school district are 2 years behind from a credit perspective. So these are students who need to catch up relatively quickly. Underneath the alternative education umbrella, we also have Bethany, which is a residential treatment course-placed alternative education environment with 40 students. And then what also is under the umbrella of an alternative education is Kent County Correctional Facility, which at the current time we have 22 students who are in the Kent County Correctional Facility. These can be students who are in the county, not necessarily traditional Grand Rapids Public School students, but because the Kent County Correctional Facility is in the city of Grand Rapids, those students become our students when they're housed there. So that's just an overview of the courses that we have, and within our alternative education environment right now, we have a little bit of a dilemma. And the dilemma that we have is that our alternative education students have the same credit requirements as all students in the Grand Rapids Public Schools. And so in addition to having to complete the Michigan Merit Curriculum courses, they also have to complete many elective courses as well. So if you think about, these are students who are 2 years behind, mostly 17, 18, some 19-year-olds. And in many instances, they've either come very close to completing the Michigan Merit Curriculum requirements, therefore the state of Michigan recognizes them as a graduate, or they've already completed them, and they're essentially in our alternative education sites completing elective type courses. The dilemma is that our surrounding school districts, many of the districts that take lots of students from the city of Grand Rapids, they only make their students complete the Michigan Merit Curriculum requirements, okay? So therefore, think of this scenario. A student could go to Southeast Career Pathways, the Grand Rapids Learning Center, have 20 credits. We still do not consider that student a graduate. That student walks to a neighboring school district. that only requires the Michigan Merit Curriculum requirements, that student can now be a graduate in that school district, right? Not a GRPS graduate. And we don't think that's a good thing. And our requirements for alternative education, and we shared some examples, and I can read those to you, ours are the most stringent in the county. So, full disclosure, we have some challenges with our graduation rates, specifically with our alternative education students. As a whole, if you were to take alternative education students out, our graduation rates would be close to about 80%. But because we include those students, it's significantly lower. So let me read to you some of the schools in our surrounding areas and what their requirements are. Wyoming Lee, they take many of our students, especially our students who live on the southwest side. They require students to only complete the Michigan Merit Curriculum. Now, I say only, but these are rigorous standards. 4 years of mathematics, 4 years of English, 3 years of science, 3 years of social studies, right?
Right, and this requirement is a requirement for all students or their alternative students?
For that one example in Wyoming, that's a requirement for all students in the school district. They just changed it.
Okay.
The other examples that I'm going to provide, it's only for other alternative settings. Okay, these are students who are significantly behind. Northview Alternative, Kentwood Alternative, Hope Academy, Discovery, these are all alternative ed sites where kids who live in the city of Grand Rapids attend school. Now, if I'm a student who's 17 or 18 years of age, and I can go to X program, and they are requiring the Michigan Merit Curriculum requirements and more, or I can go to another program where they just have us complete the Michigan Merit Curriculum requirements, I think I know which one I'm going to choose.
The one that offers more education.
I'm thinking as a 17-year-old who's 2 years.
Just your typical teenager.
I'm thinking of a student who is incredibly credit deficient, right? Who is significantly at risk. That's the lens I think we could. I think if my student, I'd want them to have a comprehensive education, not just meeting the Michigan Merit Curriculum requirements. But we are talking about students, many of whom will not graduate. Right now, in alternative education, we're looking at about 4 in 10 students graduate in the alternative education environment. We looked at the data for this particular school year. If this were to go into effect, 35 more kids would become high school graduates out of our alternative education environment, right? Just this year. We are proposing, and I know this is a discussion, but we are proposing the following. We would like to require students to complete the rigorous Michigan Merit Curriculum requirements in accordance with the Michigan Department of Education. Upon meeting Michigan Merit Curriculum requirements, they will have also fulfilled the requirements set forth by the Grand Rapids Public Schools. We propose that this change will go into effect starting in the 2014-2015 school year. We're a little bit later than that, okay? We would like to at least open up for discussion, hear what you have to say about it, and hopefully get something going so that we do not lose any more students and so that we can help out approximately 35 more kids who will not graduate under the current requirements.
So if I can just mention one thing, Ron mentioned that some of these kids are 17, 18, 19, but we have students that are older.
Correct.
20, who are still being held behind, but have, according to the state, met all the requirements for graduation. The MMC requirements are some of the most rigorous in the nation. So we don't feel that kids are being cheated. As a matter of fact, one of our recommendations has to do with if a child is eligible, once he or she has successfully completed the MMC, that they could also enroll in dual enrollment up through age 19. After age 20, we do not receive funding for those children. We have continued to try to educate them. We want to make their educations achievable, but we also want to give them a high-quality education. According to the state of Michigan, once they have completed MMC, they have met requirements. So we would like to ensure that our expectations are commensurate with the rest of the county, and yet we want to also ensure that kids are getting a high-quality education.
So I think Mrs. Evans' point about the student who is going to age out is very, very important. So let's say that I'm a 19-year-old student, I've completed the Michigan Merit Curriculum requirements, but I'm missing 3 or 4 electives. We can no longer educate a regular education student who turns 20. We can't do that. So that student will age out having completed the requirements of the state of Michigan, but can't get a diploma.
And will be counted as a dropout.
Correct.
Why didn't we ever,
Okay.
it's okay to ask questions.
That's because you were
Please.
getting ready to ask the first question I was going to ask. So.
Could please go ahead.
Why did we go to the higher number? Why did we go to 22?
I can-
If you remember historically, why we did that?
I can only, at that particular time, I think that there was a concern about receiving a balanced education. It was a time when we were cutting back on fine arts, and there were many who felt that the fine arts was an important piece, and I agree as well. But as a part of MMC, fine arts is included. Kids can now trade off even 1 year of their foreign language for fine arts. We feel that because of the high expectations in the beginning, as in the description of these requirements, that they would have what they needed to be successful. And if they complete those very rigorous standards and they have not aged out, we'd like to see them begin dual enrollment and at least experience some of what a college or university is about.
And I don't believe we are going to open the doors for 17-year-olds, right, to now graduate. We're talking about 17-year-olds who are 2 years behind, right? So even if they were to double up their classes, we're still talking about individuals who are 18 years of age who will have completed these requirements, right? I think what's very important, and I know that Mr. Johnson has a visual for you, but really seeing what's happened in the history of the state in terms of credits. And and I'll let Mr. Johnson explain it, where there were very few requirements starting out when many of us were in high school. Y'all can require, maybe you can remember, government. Everybody had to have government, right? That's really the only class we needed to where we are now. So, Mr. Johnson, would you like to walk us through that,
So
please?
just kind of give you a visual of what this, and kind of frame it, what it all means. So pre-MMC, the only MDE, Michigan Department of Education, graduation requirement was a half credit of government and half credit of PE. So that's all the state required and so they left it up to the districts to determine what graduation credits and standards would be. And so at pre-MMC, we had a total of 22.5 credits. And so that included a compilation of credits and courses, but there was no really specific core courses slated for junior and senior year, which you really need to be college ready. So a student, as long as they came up with 225 or 22.5 credits in any form or fashion, they could meet a graduation standard. And that's how, we had those seniors who were having basket weaving classes in their senior year. Remember those kind of experiences there? So when Jennifer Granholm in 2006 signed into legislation the Michigan Merit Curriculum, and it went into effect fall 2007, you see the column where it's the 16 in the blue. That's what the Michigan Merit Curriculum was like. 4 years of English, 4 years of math, the full credit of PE and health, 3 years of science, 3 years of social studies, and these classes are taught in our classrooms, meeting the content expectations. So there are proficiency standards that the students who demonstrate who pass through these. Also, these standards meet the NCAA qualifying standards for Division 1, 2, and 3. And if you have had any experience with NCAA, their standards are pretty stringent and rigorous. So if your state meets the NCAA qualifying standards, you have a pretty standard, rigorous graduation curriculum. So if you move over to the next column, you'll see where you have the 16 Michigan Merit Curriculum credits that are non-negotiable as a part of ours. But then on top of that, we are requiring students 6 additional credits. And so 6 credits is equivalent to 12 courses, which means 6 courses per semester, so a full year of electives. And so students who are at least in the alternative ed settings, if they have met the MMC, they have met a very rigorous standard of curriculum there. So when we say less credits, does not mean less rigor. And sometimes people equate those two. If it's less credits, it's less rigor. So like I said, we have some of the highest graduation standards in the nation, not just the region, but the nation. Whereas those students, even with IEPs, are asked to perform math from algebra through algebra 2. So students have an opportunity to do math courses in their senior year, which readies them even more for the college, next freshman college year, 4 years of English there. So you can't weasel out and have those basket weaving classes in your senior year and just kind of chill until it's graduation time. So with that Michigan Merit curriculum, it really does set a standard around rigor, and then we need to consider what is the rationale that we can give for students who have met that to require them to come back and do the 6 additional credit or the 12 additional classes or the full year of elective, that's what's needed.
We have some people behind us that are here to answer questions for you. Should you have questions? So I'm not sure if all of us can answer, but we have a group of people who have been researching and studying this topic. So we are here to answer questions.
2 questions. One, could you go in detail a little bit about the dual enrollment? Can you explain that?
So the dual enrollment in the state of Michigan, you can take up to 10 classes in high school, right? So in a high school career, you can take up to 10 classes. Let's say that a student, if a 17-year-old or 18-year-old, worked incredibly fast, the light bulb went on and completed all the requirements and had 1 year left. That student could still stay enrolled with us and complete college-level classes. Now, that may be unlikely for a student who is significantly at risk, but if you look at Grand Rapids Learning Center, you're having students right now complete 3 or 4 dual enrollment classes right on Grand Rapids Community College's campus. So there are options. We're not trying to, push students out. No, you have to. We're not trying to do that. What we're saying is you can stay all the way through your senior year, right, or until you age out, and you can take these classes, 10 of them, which is equivalent to 1 full year of college. 1 full year of college. So with all of our Grand Rapids Public School students, you could enter college in your sophomore year, and that saves parents and yourself lots of money.
That would be primarily with students who are pretty much academically inclined, right?
Yes.
Now, correct. So you need a 2.5 grade point average to take dual enrollment classes. But if you're in the Grand Rapids Learning Center, we have an agreement with their president that they have a re-engaged GPA. So if they go to Grand Rapids Learning Center for 1 semester and their GPA, they have a good GPA while they're there for 1 semester, even if their cumulative is not a 2.5, they will allow students to take dual enrollment classes on their campus.
They were receptive of that concept because we convinced them that the students did not lack the aptitude, but sometimes students end up in alternative education settings because of life interruptions.
That's right.
And so it wasn't always about ability, but it was like I said, a life situation. And so they came in and were able to demonstrate that they could handle high school level courses and hit the GPA that was needed. And so they were willing to discuss that with that particular group of students.
Pastor Moody, you have one more question?
Yeah, my other question is this. I think you really kind of answered the second part when you said that in reference to the students' ability who are in some of the alternative programs. They can somewhat do the work, but because of some other constituent circumstances, I can understand it. The classes that students are taking now in the alternative program, are they these courses that are being offered right now?
The Michigan Merit Curriculum courses?
Right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And what is the results of those students in terms of getting through those courses? Are the majority of them passing the courses, or are they still struggling in some of the courses?
You know what, we have lots of students in alternative education who are struggling. As we talked about before, our graduation rate in alternative education is below 50%. So full disclosure, it's right there. These are some students who have significant challenges. We do at Grand Rapids Learning Center, this is December, we've had 4 students graduate from September to December. This is a small program. I think I said the numbers are 47, so 4 graduates. And remember, it's not just one grade level we have there. We have multiple grade levels. So that's a small program, but students are being successful. Think about a scenario where if a student had to just complete the Michigan Merit Curriculum requirements, which are rigorous requirements, they're already on GRCC's campus. Instead of second semester taking high school classes, they could take college classes. Right?
Last question.
Yes, sir.
This is my question to you guys. And do you feel that we need to change the point system for MMC? Saying instead of doing 22, are you saying we need to go back to 20?
I'm saying for our student, or I believe we're saying for our students who are most at risk, we are talking about students who are 2 years behind, 2 years behind in school. We believe the right thing to do is to require those students to complete the Michigan Merit Curriculum graduation requirements.
Okay.
We believe it's the right thing to do. I think the wrong thing to do is have students who are almost aging out, who need to complete elective courses, not taking anything away from elective courses, but I think we're doing a disservice to students, our most at-risk kids, who have worked incredibly hard to complete the Michigan Merit Curriculum requirements, and we're holding on to them to complete classes that are not required by the state.
And when you think about it, 10 years ago, probably 80% of our kids didn't complete Algebra 2. Now we're seeing all students must complete Algebra 2. And even our special ed, unless they have a personnel curriculum of some sort, and those are adjusted for Algebra 2, but they are taking Algebra 2, so the standards are still really high.
Sure.
Some kids tend to feel that they need that smaller, more personal environment in order to be successful. They have experienced enough failure in their traditional classrooms that it isn't feasible for them to think that they want to return and be 2 and 3 years behind. Here also, we have other perspectives from other people who have worked with kids from counseling, or this is Walter DeBoer's staff as well.
To clarify, the Michigan Merit Curriculum Standards as they are this year would be 16 credits. And then starting for next year's cohort, graduating cohort, it would be 18 credits because they're adding the 2 years of world language. So what we're requesting is the 16 credits for this year, for the cohorts for this year, and then 18 credits for next year and beyond.
Question, maybe some of the staff. Do you see kids leaving prematurely because of that? That's what I would see.
Absolutely.
They would say, I can't finish this, and so I'm out of here. Well, then you've kept a diploma from them, which interferes with their life.
So
We have anecdotal testimonies from students who've come to enroll in our programs, and I vividly remember one. And when we laid out what they needed to do, they took their transcript to Hope Academy and did one class and graduated. So drop out on us, graduate on them.
It's important that they have a diploma
So
and get a job.
But how does that make us look, though?
in your document, it says that it shares that 25% of Godfrey Lee's alternative ed is comprised of Grand Rapids Public Schools students. And Northview, 50% of their alternative ed is comprised of Grand Rapids Public Schools. Is it alternative ed or?
So, is that proximity? Is it the requirements? I think probably a little bit of both.
Sure.
But certainly when we raise the standard and require an extra full year, it does disincentivize students around.
We currently are struggling to offer elective choices for them because we have such small budget for the alternative education and a small staff. We rely on online learning classes, and currently the system we're using does not offer an extensive list of electives. So those students who are just needing electives, we are really struggling to give them the electives they need for graduation.
We have an example of a student, 24 years old, waiting to graduate, just needing electives. So that young man needs to be on with his life.
And he's working. So
Working.
He should be here, giving public comment.
If we go to the lower number of credits, what kind of a disadvantage is that to the students?
Actually,
What's a negative if
18
we-
that we're asking for? I thought we said 18 for this year's.
We're talking about kids who are 2 years behind, right? And I think the advantage is
see the advantages.
outweigh,
I
you know,
see the advantage.
a disadvantage, some may make the argument that the student should have a full complement of elective offerings. That could be a counter argument.
But we would counter that with, I don't think in many instances, our kids in our general ed are getting a full complement either. They're engaging in very rigorous courses. Some kids are having to repeat a course. So I can't say, I don't think we can point to general ed as an example of giving a full complement. We never use all of our elective courses that we have developed because kids have so many openings.
I think part of the disadvantage would be that they would not participate in like KCTC, the vocational ed programs and enrollment, but we're not pushing them out, we're giving them the option. So if you want to stay and maybe explore a KCTC program, you are more than welcome to stay and still do that. If you want to stay and experience a dual enrollment, class, you're more than welcome to stay and do that.
That's a good point.
Absolutely.
That's an added feature there.
So a
You
couple
could stay.
things. So there's, it doesn't seem like there's any discussion of that perhaps we have too many credit requirements for all students. Or is that something that we're gonna want to discuss in the future? I mean, it seems like that came up 2 or 3 years ago.
I think that under our superintendent's leadership with the transformation plan, I think that we need to have lots of rich discussions about practices. I think this is one that needs immediate attention.
Right.
I think it's been on our minds for quite some time, and I believe that it's right that we do something about it, or at least bring it up to you.
That's definitely for sure. And then second, to go with that, when the language requirement goes into effect next year, we won't be raising the bar for that. We won't raise it to 24 it'll just stay. So really, we'll only end up with then 4 extra credits that are expected of students.
We are proposing 18, and it would, in that.
For alternative education.
For alternative
Right.
education, right.
But 18 next year, but 16 this
Correct.
year?
The foreign language requirements go into effect next year, so it goes
Which
from
means
16
that
to
this year's students need to be in foreign language, right? If they're gonna graduate next year.
They were informed of that a long time ago, so our counselors have been making them well aware.
All right, one other question in relation, this is just an idea that came up as you were discussing it. If part of the problem is this graduation requirement, so that's an easy fix, then we should fix it, because it seems to make sense in lots of ways. First of all, they can walk across the street and get a degree at another district, right? Also, in terms of us losing students to Northview and Godfrey Lee in general, I also know that we've closed programs that used to be in those neighborhoods. And so are we losing students also partly because those programs aren't accessible in those 2 neighborhoods as they were a few years ago?
I think it's both.
Okay, so we should consider this with the rest of the board, but we should also consider the implications of the loss of those 2 locations.
I think it's absolutely both, but the logic around this whole situation is that when students are struggling, they are already 2 years behind, or else they wouldn't be in alternative ed. I doubt if they're going to want to tack on an additional year, and that's what.
Well, that seems, my perspective, that makes complete sense, and I would support it. And I've been, so I also think that we should, doing whatever we can to make alternative education a good experience for those students that there is something that is very important. And I would think that we should consider the impact of closing those 2 locations.
Yeah, and I don't think it would be a bad idea, to tour both of those sites. I think, the Grand Rapids Learning Center in Southeast, I think folks are always pleasantly surprised when they go in. They're expecting something so different, and when they go in, they're pretty excited about what they're seeing.
So is Godfrey Lee and Wyoming Lee the same place?
So if you are going down Granville Avenue, right when it turns into Chicago Drive, Wyoming city limits.
Yeah, I know.
Godfrey Lee's right there, but their alternative ed is almost right on the border of Grand Rapids and Wyoming, so it's very close. So if I'm living in Union's district on the southwest corner of Grand Rapids, it's probably closer for me to walk there.
Yeah, that's a big problem.
Right, so there may
Other
be a
ways to-
challenge as well there. And then add to that the credit
A
piece,
year of educate, yeah.
right?
It's our retention too.
Yeah, so.
Right.
Are there any other alternative students, when they're completed, because we do have some that have completed their diplomas, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Have they gone on to college of anything?
Absolutely.
There's several students from the Learning Center that transition, the relationship allows them to transition seamlessly right into GRCC.
Okay.
They take care of the, help them with the financial aid and the counseling and the academic preparation there. So there's a really, really good beneficial relationship between the college and the school district for that particular program. But it's also accessible to the other students as well.
Okay, so what's the process? Because we don't really vote. in
Well,
this
I have a
body.
couple questions. Can you
Oh,
go ahead?
oh, go ahead, yeah, say.
So I'm wondering the kind of support services that you're offering these students, because obviously they're struggling in life too, not just academic. There are behavioral issues, there's other kinds of things that are going on. So I'm wondering, and I'm wondering in comparison to some of these other programs, Godfrey Lee and so forth, in terms of what they're doing to help that student figure out who they are and all that kind of good stuff.
Well, I think if you look at Southeast Career Pathways, so they have a full-time principal, they have a part-time assistant principal, they have counseling staff, they have youth advocates, they have regular education and special education teachers for approximately 70 students, right? So they have lots of staff members. Now, speaking to, outside resources and things of that nature, I would have to get back to you with a more comprehensive list. But I can say to you that there are small class sizes in these programs where students get the attention that they may not get in a larger comprehensive high school.
And we moved from all online, and I think that was critical.
That was a critical piece of Southeast Career Pathways, where we went from exclusively online, under Superintendent Neal's leadership, to the opportunity to take an online course if you need it, but to a traditional style where technology is infused into traditional pedagogy.
Some kids who have families may elect to take an online course. But there is an option, and kids tend to know their learning styles. And so I think that has made a huge difference.
In terms of support services for the program at the Learning Center on the GRCC campus, the college really recognizes those students as though they're college students, so they have access to the same tutorial supports, the academics reinforcement centers as the college kids. So they really have kind of wrapped their arms around them with their support services, and the kids can access them just as though they were a GRCC student.
And sometimes more support for English language learners than we provide, because it's a large community college.
Matthias, did you have another?
Well, does Union have their alternative ed? You guys have.
No, Union has a
anymore.
newcomers program for English, for students who are brand new to the United States. We have that. We had the Pinnacles before. We no longer have those Pinnacle programs. And then Union, of course, had its small center of innovation that moved over to Innovation Central. So Union has some programs for students with disabilities, the newcomers program, and Union Comprehensive.
No, I like the fact that at the Kent County Correctional Facility that the students are all the part of Grand Rapids Public School. I like that for the mere fact that, one school is educating those students in there. But at the same time, what's the follow-up on those kids that are in this program at the correctional facility?
Yeah, so with the staff members that we have in place now, their goal is to not only focus on instruction while the students are there, they're also making connections with schools outside of our school district, because in some instances, kids don't come back to Union or Ottawa Hills. They may go to Godwin Heights, Wyoming Public, etc. And one of the duties of those individuals is to make those connections, to make sure it's a seamless transition when the student goes back to a comprehensive school.
So, our question now has to do with how, and I think you were going to ask me that question about how to proceed. So we're hoping for a recommendation for a broader conversation. We're, of course, with the superintendent and to bring this to the board as well for their approval. We would, of course, work with the superintendent to make sure that we are following the procedures that she would want us to. but she wanted us to start with the Achievement Committee first, by holding a conversation with this committee before moving any further.
So your notes here have that we need to revisit section 7,000. Would maybe one way to proceed with that is to have your staff create a draft policy proposal, and then to bring that to the board for a reading?
Okay, the 7,000, we did not make policy recommendations. We made rule recommendations, but we're unclear about how to go about changing them. But we wanted to make sure that at some point we updated the board, even though they are rules. We wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity in the future to update you with what we are recommending as a change.
Okay, so let's clear. Do we know whether or not the board needs to implement a policy change?
To implement, I'm sorry.
Do we need to actually change policy to implement this?
I would want you to make that decision, but we did make a recommendation. Val worked on that earlier, and I think Maya did as well, to make those changes just to the rules. And we wanted to give that to you so that you could make that decision.
Is that part of the proposed here that you have written down?
It is just one statement there. We tried to break that out.
Okay.
We need to know. We don't really have a
I can get that
policy
to you.
committee. So we would, if this is, so basically, we need to know whether or not the board needs to vote to make this change. That's what we need to know, is that can we make this change without a board vote? And then it's just a practice.
Yeah.
So I believe the way we make the distinction is the board policy and then the procedures. And so if it's just your procedures that need to change, you can change that, and then we would just support it. But if it's a board policy change, we need to have to bring it as a reading. So I guess I could perhaps, if we could have, Walter shaking his head, if you know, or if Sharon Pitts needs to know, or whoever, can just let us know, and then if necessary, I can meet with them to hash out a policy,
I think our belief is it's the former, right?
meaning,
Meaning it wouldn't be a policy change, but that's why we're bringing it here, just to ensure that we're doing things correctly.
I think we need to review the policy.
Correct.
Right now, to see if
Correct.
it can-
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, that should really go to a policy committee.
yeah, which we don't have. So
You can do an ad.
we could actually
You could
be
do it
the ad hoc,
very well.
we could probably
Do
be
an
the
ad
ad hoc policy committee in
Sure.
this case.
Because it's
But I
really-
don't want to,
Doesn't
this
sound
is
like it's
something,
hard to do.
this seems like something that you should move quickly, because these are students wondering whether or not they graduate. You got a 24-year kid who's ready to graduate
Yeah,
as soon as we vote on this, so.
doesn't actually impact this piece directly, but we wanted to, and that's kind of why we separate. I probably should have brought that at a different time. But we want to not make changes, even in rules, without informing this committee.
That's right.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we're at with this. In the process of investigating and research, we found errors in our procedures that we're going to correct. It doesn't have a direct impact on this, though.
Okay, so I would say if we can move it to, let's find out the quickest way to move it to the board. And you guys let us know.
Well, we could quickly review our policy and see if anything's in there that prohibits this.
Okay.
That
Right.
might be a place for us to start to say, is there anything that we have to change? And if we do, then you
Nate,
get a
did you
cue.
wanna-
And it really, I don't think it did, and that's kind of why I narrowed it down to one statement. There were other pages of research that they engaged in, but it didn't directly impact this, but it is something that we would want you to look at.
Okay. All right, I'm not still quite sure what we're gonna do next. Mo, could you plan to meet with someone to determine if we need to make a policy change? So if you could make,
How about we pull a team together to meet with you?
yeah,
Does that work?
Sounds good.
yeah.
Wonderful.
And then I would just say, let's do whatever does it the quickest. So,
Thank you.
Because time is an issue for you.
yeah, because
Absolutely.
I'd hate to have to wait
Absolutely.
another month until this committee meets again, so.
Well, luckily, we have the holiday break,
Yeah.
right? And then we'll try to work through this as quickly as possible after the holiday break.
Susan and Neil did ask that we try to move on as quickly as possible. Dr. DeBoer's team has the background on the research. I just wanted you to know that they've been working on this over time. The counseling department as well. So whenever you guys are ready, then we will pull this team together.
Okay, yeah, just communicate with Mo as soon as.
We'll say start
I
pulling
think
together.
I think it was a good idea that you have some of the team here, because I kind of keep looking to see. Not that I mean, I love administrators, and I've been one, but I've also been one of those. So you have to see who's saying what.
Nate, did you want to add, did you want to say something else?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I'm help them.
Well, I just, what do you foresee the number of students growing to?
35 more students right now would graduate if this were to go into effect. 35 more this year
And then
from
you would,
alternative
you would
education.
expect the growth in the school to be what? I mean, from 47 to,
I would have to, we would have to crunch those numbers, but I mean, we're talking about, you know, a small group of students that are in alternative education. I mean, we're talking right now about 150 kids district-wide, maybe a few more. So that would, it seems that would make it jump up significantly.
I think the motivation factor would also kick in with some students who have, you know, may have kind of got disengaged as well if they heard that it's a different plan that they could actually achieve by June.
right, that would be a motivator for
That'd be a
them to
nice
say, you know
holiday
what,
gift
I'm gonna
when you
hunker
return
down.
from the holidays.
Yeah, I think it's less important that it's not necessarily to gain more students. I mean, that may be a good side effect, but the real point is these kids need,
Right.
these young people need to be ready to move on.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on ourselves now, just to give everybody no, it's 5:30, and we have, all we have left is special education and priority schools.
And did you see the list?
And like 6 or 7 or 8. So how about if we can figure out a way, if we'll need to keep comments, you know, and questions short, but you have a suggestion?
I'm wondering if it's okay, Cindy, if we did upload the notes, would that be sufficient for the state, since you do have that in your possession?
Yes.
So we won't have to do a priority school report, per se, you have all of the plans in your
Can
possession?
we just ask like maybe a couple quick questions?
Okay.
Just so
They are in our notes.
Cindy's family didn't have to come for no apparent reason.
This is Oscar.
Thank you.
Yeah, he's got the face of a public servant.
Oscar just keeps on growing up. I remember when you were just born.
I'm doing a PowerPoint too.
Okay.
So
There you are. Slideshow.
There you go. All right, with Mel as my role model, I too have prepared.
oh my gosh.
It
Is this along or the history of special ed?
It is not.
Thank you.
It is not. I have a total of 133 days of experience with Grand Rapids Public Schools, and so this
There's a
is.
slide dedicated for each one.
No. What I wanted to provide you with some observations that I've had of special education by the numbers. I'm sure that some of the historical data is data that you've already seen, but in comparison, if we're looking at the data for 2013-14, this current school year, or last school year, which is what was reported in our state reporting, we are currently serving 17.5% of our total district population as students with IEPs. And you can see how that compares to what our sister districts are doing in Kent ISD and what the state of Michigan is doing. Really good news here is that you can also see that we're looking at a trend. Where we were in 2011-12 at 19.5%, we are now down 2%. And there's really a great amount of work that goes into really carefully looking at how do we support student learning across the board and assure rigorous instruction. So I'm really, the 17.5 by itself doesn't tell the whole story. What I also wanted to share with you is some perspectives that I think sometimes get lost. Whenever we're talking about students with IEPs, we're often talking about perceptions of students who can't learn. And what I like to do by presenting it in this fashion is to give us a real visual picture of just who our composition is in that 17.5%. So we're talking about 27.4% of those students having speech and language impairment, 17.8% of those students having a specific learning disability, 7.3% having an emotional impairment, 6.3 having autism spectrum disorder, and then the pure hearing and visual impairments are coming in at about like 1% each. And those are real key numbers, because out of the 13 eligibility areas in Michigan for specialized instruction, 8 of them, to be eligible to receive special education programs and services, you must show evidence of having an average or greater intelligence. And that's something that we often lose track of. We're not talking about our students with a cognitive impairment. We're not talking about our students with severe multiple impairments. We also know that we've got students with other health impairments that fall into that syndrome-based area, medical model. We're talking about students who have attention deficit hyperactivity, whose emotions impede their learning, who have trouble processing and producing, but who think at a really high level. They just don't perform at a very high level. So 8 out of the 13 areas are required by rule, by determination of eligibility, to have a greater or average intellect. And I already swung through those, and those are our numbers a little more clearly than the chart that was behind you. So all told, if you took all of those numbers and you added them together, about 17 point something% of our students with IEPs have an eligibility that would typically be aligned to average or greater intellect. 71%. And I think that that's a really important thing to consider as, what's that?
I think so too.
Yay.
So, but what that means is that 71% of, say, someone with a hearing disability nationally are above average intelligence. Doesn't mean that 71% of Grand Rapids Public School students who are identified with a learning disability are above national averages. You understand what I'm saying? That statistic is not about Grand Rapids Public School students.
This is us.
71% of GRPS students with IEPs have an eligibility, so is it the eligibility that typically has a higher? But that doesn't necessarily mean that GRPS students with those disabilities are higher.
Michigan's administrative rules for special education clearly identify what has to be considered to have an autism spectrum disorder or an other health impairment or a specific learning disability. And so all of those have rule outs for any cognitive learning deficits. So in order to be ruled in for any one of these, a factor of that, if we're doing our diligence in evaluation the way it was meant to be, and we've got some issues there that we're working through in 133 days and counting, we could expect that 71% of the students that we have as a part of our whole are eligible to receive special education services, and in receiving those services have average or greater intellect.
Because that's true nationally?
Because you have,
Now you can try another way. Well,
you know, if they're emotional, you have to identify the fact that they're not below average.
Right.
For example, if you're emotionally impaired, if you have a label of emotional impairment, you've had to have ruled out that it's about IQ. So those kids are not mentally impaired.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
No, but can you go to the slide where you use the 71%?
oops.
So when you say that would typically be aligned to, an eligibility that would typically, so the list that you had, your hearing impairment, visual impairment, that was an eligibility list, right?
Yep,
Okay, so those lists typically are aligned to average or greater intelligence.
that's accurate.
Persons in the United States that are
Correct.
identified with hearing impairment or visual impairment are typically aligned to average or greater intelligence. Okay, but we don't know that that's necessarily true. I just want to get a point, that this is true, that the GRPS students might not have multiple concerns that we need to deal with, and,
Then they're called multiple.
right.
Yep, and
But I
and
think that
use-
this is a jargon I'm trying to get to, is that, are we accurately describing the students that we're serving Grand Rapids Public Schools, or are we assuming that what's true about them is what's true about their national group?
I think we have our due diligence in front of us to say what's true about the students in the United States is also true about Grand Rapids Public Schools. To hold ourselves to any lesser standard would not be a service to
But
students.
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that our standard is to serve the students well.
Yes,
If they so we need to know who our students are.
yes.
And not assume that what's true about children with hearing impairments nationally is also true about hearing impairments in Grand Rapids Public Schools.
With some very slight variances, they would be, though. That
Okay, well,
a
that's what I
hearing
wanna know. Okay,
A hearing
so-
impairment nationally, regionally, and from a state perspective is a hearing impairment. It's a loss of X decibel. A visual impairment is a mandate for 2,200 vision, flat. And so, for students.
So what I want to know is that if children with visual impairments in Grand Rapids Public Schools are our children aligned with average or greater intelligence? And we know that based on an analysis of Grand Rapids Public School students.
We know that based on the evaluation process that they are required to go through to be eligible.
Let me try one too. If at the IEP, the child has a below average intelligence and a visual impairment, they would qualify for a program that will best meet their needs. They wouldn't be called visually impaired. They might be I mean,
Yeah, they might have a multiple
really, yeah,
impairment
there might be
or,
multiple impairments, so you have to go through them individually.
What were the other 4 areas?
The-
So we got 8 here, but what were the other 4?
the other 4 areas of eligibility. I can take you back to those. There's deafblindness. Physical impairment, also physical impairment doesn't always relate to more. Early childhood developmental delay requires that you are at a 2 standard deviation function below. You've got your severe multiple impairments at 6.1%. You've got your traumatic brain injury, which has cognitive manifestations, and then your cognitive impairments at 15.7%. So those are the other areas of eligibility that typically do have a cognitive implication.
Okay. Now, the Pacific Learning Disabilities, what were they?
Students with specific learning disabilities, you can have a learning disability in reading, and there's 6 different areas for that, or mathematics, and there's 2 areas for that.
It would be average intelligence or above,
Right,
which is the point.
right.
People assume when they say special ed that they're all below
Or
average,
average.
and that's not
So
correct.
my point is that I understand the significance of making sure that we're not blinded by misperceptions about children labeled special ed who have IEPs. I want to know what our children need. And so that's what I'm not asking so if nationally they tend to be above average, that's great news, but I want to know, what do our children need?
Yeah.
Not by discounting a stereotype by assuming that our children don't need anything because nationally they're above average.
They
Yep.
would qualify.
I think I threw
But
you.
identified that to a
Yeah.
degree in the percentage.
Each child is identified individually, they're not grouped. So you look at this kid and you say, average intelligence, but blind.
Well, I could say, I'm
But
just
if they're
saying that
not
I could just
average,
say that, we could say, okay, well, it looks like all of our students are above average, so we don't need to
Oh,
have
no.
extra learning resources.
I don't think that's the point.
Okay. Right.
Average with a disability.
Yes.
Yes. Because something exists that prevents them from making progress, that impedes their progress in general education without specialized instruction. It's the specialized instruction that's supposed to clear the path and level the playing field and help people make progress and get to where they're going next. I think I threw you with the language use of typically, and the reason why I did that is, again, I'll go back to boots on the ground here just 4 months, and I'm still learning about what our systems of evaluation and eligibility are. And I think in a year from now, I'll be able to say typically again, because I know that we've got some targeted areas that we need to do improvements in, or I'll be able to wipe that completely out and say 71% of our students have average or greater intellect because I have confidence in the way that we're delivering that evaluation process.
Okay.
I just can't do that right now.
But I might add that that would be typical of any school district.
Yes. Yes. In fact,
Because you're individually going through them.
yeah, in fact, this is important because it impacts least restrictive environment for us at environments. That's one of the requirements under IDEA. It's also a requirement for 80-80, meaning 80% of the students with IEPs will be in front of rigorous instruction 80% of the time, and that's in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The educational environments comes from the Michigan Monitoring Standard. We've done that to ourselves. So what we're looking at here is where we're educating our students. And so what we would like to see is trends that we've got going here, like for Kent ISD. In 11-12, about 60% of their students were in front of general education 80% of the time. The following year, it was 61%. The following third year, last year, it was 65%. Same thing with the state of Michigan, going from 62 to 65. If you look at Grand Rapids, we really made a jump from 11-12 to 12-13, and then we went back the other way. So one of my missions in coming before you is to let you know what are the things that I'm paying attention to. If 71% of our kiddos have average or greater intellect by clear expectation and belief that we're doing the right evaluation for them and making them eligible for the right areas of need, then we would expect that 71% of them would be capable of rigorous instruction with supports in general education. And yet that's not the decision we're making. And so it calls a question for me as to why not and what's next for us. So while our 49% or our 48% there is impacted by us definitely operating center-based programs, still we're comparably low. Research indicates that where we serve kids matters. If I'm pulling students away from rigorous instruction who have a specific learning disability, I'm taking them away from their highly qualified staff, the people who are most capable of delivering that instruction to them, and instead I'm educating them in a different environment and holding them to a different standard. If we increase the number of students receiving instruction in gen ed, the research says that we're going to increase our student and graduation outcomes.
Okay, I'm gonna beat a dead horse there again. Can you go back to that? So,
Yep.
okay, so now you're saying that 71% of the students that
Who have IEPs.
that have IEPs are at or above average intelligence. But that's different than saying 71% of them have, what was the word you used, the designation of the impairment. The chart that you said, when you said 71% are diagnosed with something that typically leads to.
They're eligible, 71% are eligible. And
71% of the eligible criteria. So I think that I just feel like we're making a statistical error here. All right, so can you go back to that 71% slide again?
Mm-hmm.
Just an average or greater.
71% of GRPS students with IEPs have an eligibility that would typically be aligned to average or greater intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
But that does not mean that 71% of GRPS students with IEPs have an average or greater intelligence. It just means that they have an eligibility that typically
their category placement typically would service students with average or above.
Right, but does not mean that 71% of the students.
Doesn't mean that they looked at each and every student to determine their intelligence. That's what it does not mean.
So if the only thing, but it's still, we don't know, so if we're gonna measure the 71% versus the 49% that you have that have not moved to general, then we don't really know if the 71% is necessarily true. I mean, if we compared the number of students that didn't have a eligibility requirement with state standards, we would be below the state standards, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yet they don't have an eligibility requirement that says that. So we have to measure ourselves against who we are, not who we ought to be, right? And so what I'm saying here is that perhaps something else is going on that is with these kids, because we're not saying 71% of students with IEPs have average or greater intelligence. We're saying that they have an eligibility that typically means that they have average or greater intelligence.
Yeah, and again, I use the word typically because I don't know our systems well enough to be able to say, I'm confident in that. And I did that on purpose and not to skew the conversation or to.
But we don't know that 71% of GRPS students with IEPs have average or greater intelligence.
That is correct.
So when we're comparing that 71% to the 49%, we don't necessarily know that that's a fair comparison.
I don't know if I
Maybe
would.
we're adequately addressing the issue by having half of them, because they're not at the level that they need to be. And so our goal then is to get them to that level.
I hope not. But we'll continue to work towards that understanding.
Well, then maybe we're not understanding each other.
The graduation rate for students with IEPs in Grand Rapids, and we only have 11, 12, and 12, 13 data. The 13, 14 data gets released a year late. And so in the state, it was at 51%, and we were at 17.5. In 12, 13, which is the last data that we have access to, we're at 15.7%, and the state was at 53.5. So I guess my commentary is that we've got some work to do on behalf of students with IEPs, because the expectation for high rigor and to sit in front of general education instruction and to make progress is there. We just need to think about how we're delivering instruction, who are those students, what are their needs, and how are we going to get them to where they need to be next.
I guess I have no questions over some of the numbers, too. Maybe there's another way to look at that. I think most special ed kids are regular ed.
No. 47%.
Because we've got all the center programs.
Yes,
Okay, we'll take out those center programs. The center programs, we operate for the ISD.
yeah.
So we've got all the school districts in there. And they're the ones that hold the IEPs, sent the kids, but it's our job then to
Yes.
look at it and say, oh, there's really not a problem. We have another IEP, and so get them out of there.
Yes.
If they're incorrect.
Yes.
But, so if you take all those kids out of there, you've got Grand Rapids kids. Most of those are in general ed. Most of those kids are in general education.
Okay.
Yeah, they might be in a resource room, or they might have a teacher pushed in, or they might be, I don't think they're pulled out much anymore, are they? You know, I don't think so. I think mostly they're pushed in.
Yeah.
So they're really, in my experience, generally in regular education, unless they're really severe, or they're little kids. You know, if they're preschool, if they're, you know, if they're hearing impaired, and we also operate in the center programs. So, but I can't believe that in the schools that I've been in, that most of those kids are locked in special ed rooms. If I were to ask the teachers in this district whether those kids are in special ed rooms most of the day, they'd tell me I was nuts. They might want them to be in there, You know, I mean, seriously, I mean, it's difficult to put a lot of the kids into general
Absolutely.
ed. Where a
We're
general
talking
ed
about
teacher-
3,000 students.
Yeah, you've
Yeah.
got 30 kids in the room and 5 of them got problems, or 10 of them have problems, let alone the rest of the kids that have problems. So I don't believe they're being self-contained rooms. So there's something wrong with the statistic.
Right, and so we need to look at our data.
Yeah.
So-
We need to look at what's happening. Because I would, if I'm looking around here, I would doubt that you've got a self-contained room, more than one in your building. 2?
We do, we have different programs, so
Right.
ours is kind of a little special. I mean, we have our CI programs, we have ASD programs.
Yeah,
So that-
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
different.
but skip those. Those are the minority of kids.
For
Those
the-
are
for
few,
the learning disabled kids,
LD kids.
they're all inside of general education.
See,
Yeah,
that's my
receiving
point.
resource services.
Right. They're not in special
Yeah, they
ed rooms.
receive services, right.
Yeah, they're receiving services, but they're not sitting in a special ed classroom all day long, or even half the day, or even a third of the day. Because if I were to ask the teachers, they say they're in my classroom too much. The regular ed teachers would say that. Seriously, I mean, frankly, it's difficult to have a lot of special ed kids in your room. If you've got 30 kids in the room, you know what? 15 of them with special needs. Our kids have special needs anyway, so I think the stats are wrong.
Those are the stats that get reported. And so that's a part of that story, is that we get reported to media based on what gets reported to the state. And so what we have to do, and what I've begun doing, is working with Walter and his group and looking at
Who's doing what, yeah.
who is doing what, how are we doing that? Do we have the right students matched with the right programs and services? Can we come together and say, we're doing what we need to be doing for students who have IEPs to make sure that they get to graduation if they're capable of doing that? And those are the directions that we're heading. And that's all the foundational work that's been started, that we're just continuing to champion because it's the right work to do. They're the right questions to ask. In doing that, we're working on shifting that focus from just that compliance, what do the numbers say, to the results. So what are the students actually achieving? Where are they going? We have to work harder on stabilizing our staff. We have a tremendous amount of staff turnover. We're still trying to fill positions. We are working hard to create a professional development plan that includes all of our stakeholders, and that includes our paraeducators who deliver instruction and follow students into those environments where high learning is taking place. It includes helping our school social workers know that their role isn't to be therapeutic, but rather to be instructional in how do they create an environment that assures that a student is going to make progress. We're looking at aligning our budget to the department and doing, if you will, transformation for ourselves and building our capacity so that we can do teams of success for students, so that a building doesn't have to have the responsibility of having a budget of an entire team of people who are there for intervention purposes, but rather being able to move people around and to be able to dig in where there's issues and responsibilities that need to be addressed. So for me, the indicators for us would be to continue to decrease the numbers of students with IEPs. You can see that that's already been a wonderful trend. That will be evidenced through annual reporting, through My School Data, and improved practices for our multi-tiered systems of support. Those are in our buildings, those student success teams. Increasing the percentage of students receiving instruction in general ed setting. I think some of those issues that we're experiencing with our numbers have to do with how we're reporting our data as well. Dirty data gets us every time, but it's what the media gets, it's what our communities get, and we want to paint a different picture for who it is and how we deliver service. Also, we're looking at those improvements to graduation rates. And that we've already been working really hard on, and one of the barriers that we have is, like you had said, is the operators of center-based programs for the entire county. Our graduation rate gets waged against the 1,000 students that we serve for ourselves and the other districts, and only the 3,000 of us get those those pure graduation rates, and that doesn't get aggregated. So we're aggregating those numbers for ourselves. The other thing that I was asked to do for you guys is to give you an update on where we are with suspensions and significant disproportionality. As you are probably aware, the data is a year in arrears, so that this year's data that comes out that's going to determine whether or not we're in significant dispro was locked down in June. It was last year's data. So we're working with the Department of Education to clean our data in two major areas, actually three. We just had a data meeting this afternoon. We're being held accountable for 3 to 26-year-olds right now on our data, and the statewide accountability monitoring is set for 6 to 21. So we think that by really focusing on only those students in that data profile that are 6 to 21, we're going to be in better shape. The other issue we have is that operators of center programs are being held accountable for, we're being held accountable for their local demographic. We get that for students who attend our non-public schools in Grand Rapids as well, because we have the vast number of non-public schools within our city boundaries, and we're in service to those students too through proportionate share and IDEA dollars, and so those kiddos get counted against us as well. And those numbers haven't typically been brought to the department previously. And you're probably aware from Teresita's work with you that Grand Rapids Public Schools is the only singular school district in the entire state of Michigan that operates countywide programming. Whereas local districts operate it for other counties, there are multiple districts within that county that operate them, and we house everything here. So that puts us at a great disadvantage because we're measured against what everybody else does, being one of 56 ISDs. So we're working also with other departments to introduce other alternatives to suspensions, and spent a good part of the morning doing that on behalf of one of our elementary schools and principals today. So what questions might you have?
So I would say that, yeah, this is definitely an area that we most definitely need to radically improve. I mean, at the school level, I see a lot of parents really confused, sad, because sometimes it feels as though their kid is moved out of, because they have one strength in an area, moved out of special ed or those services, when in fact, and then they plummet almost immediately. And then by the time that truck can turn, they've lost significant time. So classroom time, the kinds of things that happen. So it's good that we're looking at cleaning that data up, and then looking at the resources and how that's utilized. The assessments that are done and who does them. Often it feels like the parent has to seek the services outside of the school to get them. Take them to your doctor, to take them to a psych, to take them. And by the time that happens, significant time passes, and the loss, and the kid is the one who receives that lost time, meaning in classroom or whatever happens. So, yeah, I'm glad that we're starting to see and figure out the data and look at the resources and see the partnerships that need to happen, all that.
We sure are.
I'd like to echo what John said. So there's lots of ways to decrease IEPs, right? And, you could just not do them, right? So
That's not the preferred way.
It's not the way we work.
But I mean, I would go with some of the things that John probably has seen more. I have people coming up to me saying stuff like that to me, that they get moved off of IEPs or they're not getting IEPs. I don't know what to make of that because I don't know that much about that process. But I would like to be assured that, I'd like to be able to assure people that, that's not what's occurring. But there is, I don't hear that many complaints, but that is one complaint I hear. So
It's a cumbersome process.
Right, so it's really, it'll be good to know, if people feel, especially since such a high percentage of our students are students, we need to make sure we're adequately doing as well, so.
But I have to say that we have some phenomenal staff.
We do.
They really, they're magicians. They can do stuff and work with
Yeah.
kids and kids that are turned around that you would think, and they do it, and working with the parents that they do, and so we have some phenomenal staff,
We
some very
do.
committed staff, and hardworking parents too that want to see, their kid have an opportunity or a chance at something. So we're just ready.
With that
I see that
statement,
too.
you have 5 key challenges on here. You have one that says stabilizing staff. Have you put something in place to deal with that already, or?
We met as a leadership team, the special education supervisors and principals and I on Friday, to look at, we're moving into budget preparation and what is our vision for ourselves? What are we holding ourselves accountable for, and how do we come around our human capital? Because we know that it's the magic in our individuals and our systems that get the work done for kids. And so we have set some pretty lofty and rigorous objectives out for ourselves to continue to look at that. We're looking at the way we deliver services, especially for our youngest learners in say, the 3 to 5-year-old early childhood special education. Do we have opportunities to partner more with our Great Start collaborative? There's some wonderful relationships that have been built. We have more opportunities to look as well at how we're doing in our transition areas for students who are post-school age but who haven't yet completed. And I was listening with a really interested ear to what that might mean for students who are 2 years behind, for students with IEPs in graduation, and getting them ready for what's next. We too serve individuals who have jobs and come to school half days, and it's those kinds of realities that we really need to clear the path for kids and get better at that. Stabilizing staff is getting them the information that they need. Folks are typically very eager to know what's happening, and getting to all of the pockets of, I get 500 staff just in center-based programs. So, action plans for getting to each and every person who puts their hands on kids so that they have consistent, timely information and how to do their job is really a big job. And it takes, I think, careful understanding and planning of what it is that we do and how it is that we do it. So I don't have answers right now, but they are all on the radar because we have to act urgently. Kids are worth it. We want to make that a brighter future for all of them every day.
I guess we should revisit this, although it'll be with probably a different group of people. All right, thanks.
Dr. Baker, you did ask that this be a topic that would be brought to the board more than once per year.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't know if that is still going to be the plan, but maybe we get an update.
Yeah, I think that sounds like
definitely.
everybody in this committee would like it, and I'm sure there'll be some overlap, so.
Great.
If the next chair of this committee can
And if I
ask
can
for it,
just
so.
say as a testimony, I met with one of the special ed social workers who you could see the passion and compassion. We were talking about an individual, and her perspective was, this is in the 8th grader, we have to get them ready for high school. And you can just see that she was thinking, we have this much time left, and we really have to get this student ready, and we got to make sure that all these things are in place so that they have a chance as they move forward. So I think that, we're seeing that those folks are really
Yeah, I
care
know
about their
one,
kids.
we got a lot of great staff at GRPS, but special education teachers are definitely among the passionate, and so, can we do a couple quick questions about the priority schools? And we'll try to make them.
Otherwise, I'm going to leave.
We'll make it really
Because
quick.
I really have a plan. I've got at 6 o'clock.
Okay. I just, real quick, in terms of this as a review, and we do have this documents here, and we are supposed to report, I just, since this is coming from the MDE, how, is the MDE satisfied with our work on the priority schools?
Yes.
Okay.
So just a couple notes. First, the 2 newly identified schools this year, which were Coit and Ken O'Shea. Those plans I mentioned last time we met, those were submitted. We've not heard yet whether or not they're approved plans, but we anticipate actually this week that we will hear whether those are approved plans or not. And if they're not approved, then we'll rewrite. We'll get some support from MDE and we'll do a rewrite. But we do anticipate to hear that actually yet this week. And then currently, the identified schools, previously identified schools, are going through a monitoring process right now. In fact, that was the reason that I was a little late today. The schools are all being monitored right now. So the monitor is visiting all of the schools, everyone from Ottawa to, and I was at Dickinson
And the
today.
week before Christmas is always the best week to visit
It's
schools.
fabulous. Yes.
So I noticed one school on that list was Alger, and it says that MDE has not approved the redesign plan for these programs. Is that still true?
Yes, the plan, it's a technical issue. It had to do with both Alger and Westwood came out of being actually SIG schools. So they did not formally have to submit a reform and redesign plan. So that's a technical piece. So they are operating under an approved plan, which was their school improvement grant plan.
Okay. Any other? All right. I know we got to go, but, okay, thanks. I
Thank
just
you.
want to make sure that we're.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
That's a good
right.
clarification. Thank you.
All right, meeting adjourned. We are going to do this again one last time with this group in the January, even if we have changes, we're still going to do this.
Yeah.